Hello everyone, my name is Alex and I am on the marketing team at Beck Technology, and today we're excited to bring you an exciting and educational webinar discussion between Doug Maiden of Beck Technology and Jim Kurth and Scott Warren of Ryan Companies. Before we begin, I wanted to share a little bit of information about how you can make the most of this discussion. During the course of today's webinar, you'll notice that there is an area for you to submit questions in the GoToWebinar taskbar. Please submit any questions or thoughts that you might have so that our speakers today might have a chance to answer and respond to those. If we're not able to get to all of them, we will send those on to today's speakers so that they can ensure that all questions are answered. As always, a recording of this webinar will be available for viewing following today's discussion. That recording will be available via YouTube and in an email to all registrants. Today's conversation will be centered around the pre-construction industry hot topic of streamlining growth and collaboration and making the switch from Excel-based estimating. Ryan Companies was recently awarded the 2022 Built World's Digital Leaders Award for their technology adoption, utilization, and implementation accomplishments in project management, pre-construction, and a field solution project delivery by Built Worlds. Now, without further ado, I would love to introduce Doug Maiden, Customer Success Specialist at Beck Technology, Jim Kurth, Director of Estimating at Ryan Companies, and Scott Warren, Vice President of Pre-Construction at Ryan Companies.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Well, this topic is about changing from Excel over to a database-driven system. Scott, I'd like to start with you. What were the drivers that led you to move from an Excel-based estimating platform over to a database-driven system?
There were a number of them. I think they can all be boiled down to three major areas that we were really seeing as challenges for us, and that is accessibility and transparency, consistency in our process, and then just kind of that overall accuracy and efficiency in how we were doing things. We've been in Excel-based estimating for 20 plus years, and it has done well for us. It really has. But as we've grown, as we've expanded across the country, have offices in multiple cities, multiple regions, it's very difficult to access information, just even knowing what is being done in Excel as far as estimates being created, being able to get to those to compare and use for new projects coming up. So there was a lot of challenges there when it comes to just being able to access information, having that transparency into knowing what's there. That's really been probably the biggest item. Consistency in our process is another one. We had a great Excel template in how we did it, but then once it got to the project, anybody could do anything they wanted to, right? Excel is wonderful that way. You can make it do anything you like, and really, and that became a challenge all by itself. Is just being able to have that consistency. I like to tell the story. We had a client a few years ago that it was a national client, doing great work with them, and we had 3 projects, identical projects in 3 different regions, and they came back to us after we were kind of under construction on all of them, and basically said, we love the work, we love it across the board, we love it in each one of the projects, but it feels like we're working with 3 different companies, and it's just that consistency or lack of consistency that we were really fighting, and part of that is in our estimating process. So that was one, and then the last, like I said, accuracy and efficiency. Excel is very accurate, but it offers opportunity to make mistakes and to have problems, and and so you're dependent on somebody helping you to fix them, and there's just a lot of things that make it inefficient and can cause mistakes and can cause problems. In itself, it's accurate, but using it, just having that many people with their fingers in it using it, it can cause issues. So those are really the big items that we really spent a lot of time trying to understand where we needed help, and kind of looking at those and identifying those is really what we decided. That's when we decided we really need to go have a tool. We need a tool a platform that can really kind of bring all these things together and help us in each one of these. They're not perfect, but at least try to mitigate a lot of these issues, create some of that accessibility, create that transparency that we're severely lacking, and help us build that consistent process. So those are the big things. There's a number of other little ones and things, but they all kind of fall under these three buckets. So
thank you for sharing that. So Jim, you and I work closely together during the implementation. Would you tell us about the journey that you went through and the team went through with Beck Technology?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be curious if we were the longest of your career or where we stood, but it was definitely when I got involved in the summer of 21. It was really about a year-long collaboration from that point, and obviously with you and Allison and the rest of the team and several Ryan people, where we were collaborating to create our database, from scratch. We didn't really technically have a database, right? We had a template of line items that people could use, so that became the genesis of our database. We wanted to develop and refine those processes, build those assemblies, and establish our workflows. So we didn't obviously want to give up on the 25+ year history of what we had done, reports and tools that we had grown accustomed to, and it was already going to be such a huge shift in our process and our mindset that we wanted to kind of take it with in baby steps, if you will. So a couple things that happened along the way that we started when we were hiring some new individuals. We were both looking for people that were familiar with database estimating. Was becoming an immediate big plus. My right hand, as you know, Ali Macias, was also involved in not only database estimating, but making a switch from software. So like, what does it take to implement something? They were switching database to database software, but just that mindset helped as well. And then Eric Sonnenberg, as you also know, like he came from database estimating as well. So it was actually really great when we kind of developed that initial team. The three of us became the trainers, and we could speak to real life experience and learn from their experience to make it work for everyone. And then obviously I would never hear the end of it if I didn't mention Mary Hadeen, and our Excel guru of 25+ years, still heavily involved. She is very much not out of a job switching from Excel into this, because we still rely on it for obviously dashboards and database updating and assemblies and all that. So, but anyways, kind of taking us through the process was we had about 6 months of traveling and training where we bought the training to the people. And we're a little bit unique at Ryan that our project managers are heavily involved in estimating to varying degrees depending on the project and the opportunity and their experience. But so we trained our pre-con staff first, but then we came to each of our offices and said, okay, trying to focus on just-in-time training and follow up with virtual sessions. But we knew that in-person was going to be required in order to do these trainings efficiently. But we're slowly being able to migrate and having success with going more virtual just to save everyone time and money from that heavy travel aspect. So I think a couple things that worked for us along the way too is we always asked for that feedback during the training as well as once people got into it, and we implemented that feedback as soon as we could. So we made quick guides and short videos and our own reference manual and different ways, as people figured out different ways to break the dashboard, we came up with ways to error proof. So it was harder to break the dashboard and the reports. They're still getting very creative in that, but we're still working to try to do that. So then right now we're kind of in our transitioning from training and implementation really into our support, our maintenance, and continual improvement stage where we really want to start to encourage kind of our local experts, so they don't always have to rely on, our small nucleus of team. A lot of people still do, which is great, and we want that feedback. But we're really trying to now grow that into helping people find ways to use the software and truly understanding how to use the software. So then when they come up with something that they need to be creative, because we always need to be creative in servicing our clients, because they're also unique in what they ask for us, they're able to do a little bit more of that on their own. And obviously collaborating with you, Doug, and your team, and Moa and everyone at Beck, just to continue to figure out how to make ourselves better, how to make the software better, can just continue to streamline it. So yeah, it's been a process. It's been fun. I mean, it was a heavy lift, for sure, especially for so many people. I mean, we've put now, I don't know the exact number, but I would say probably close to 300 plus people through training on Destiny at Ryan Companies, and that's that unique process of PMs are involved. But our pre-con department is only, and I say only, but it's 65 people. So we have hundreds of other PMs, and that'll continue to grow as people close out a job and come into pre-construction during that phase of their project management. They'll get onboarded into the software as well.
It's fantastic. It's been great.
I'd just like to add two things to the journey. First of all, if we hadn't gotten Jim and his team involved, this would be even longer. So, so kudos to the whole team on getting it done. But also just wanted to say, from the Beck standpoint, you guys were great, as a great partner in this process and in this journey, really making it smooth. I know it wasn't, it feels like you're blazing the trail, regardless of how many times you've been through it. It feels like you're still having to do that some, and that's because you're getting a company that's never been involved with something like this, and it was really a truly a unique and great experience working through it with you guys. So
thank you, Scott. That's very kind. And Jim, it was fantastic to work with you, Mary, Allie, and Eric. Lots of fun. And just kind of thinking back to it all, it was great success that you were able to, and with Scott, being able to identify that you needed a core team to help drive this all the way through. So it wasn't just a kind of a part-time thing after hours. Like, it was a concentrated effort to get to the finish line, which was fantastic.
Absolutely.
Scott, when it came to evaluating database-driven systems, estimating systems, I mean, maybe you had a scorecard, maybe there was something that you were comparing all of what's out there. What was what were some of the drivers? What were the things that in your criteria list that you felt might have been differentiators when considering database estimating?
Yeah, so we've spent years looking at this, dating back all the way to when I first started. We started looking at the idea of going over to a database-driven system, and the initial kind of thing you look at are those three things, the three major buckets I already talked about as being the drivers: that accessibility and transparency, the consistency, and the accuracy and efficiency. But pretty much every system we looked at really satisfied those in some way, different degrees of success when it comes to those things. But that's really the whole point of a database system, is to be able to satisfy those types of things. And so we really had to look deeper than that. And when we went through this final evaluation, there was 4 different systems we were looking at, and really Destiny kind of set itself above all of the others, in not only in those primary items, but in kind of the more intangible areas a little bit. And not all of them intangible, but the first one we really liked is user interface. That's very tangible, but it's one that is very important. I mean, coming from a group that has been in Excel for years and years and years, and a lot of people, that's all they know, really having a user interface that is intuitive, that is easy to get through or easier to get through, helpful, something that they can wrap their minds around, was extremely important. And Destiny by far had the best one that we evaluated. Some of the other things that really kind of started to take Destiny up additional levels was that ease of transition, and that goes back to the user interface, but it's that whole moving from Excel to Destiny, to this database system that when we were evaluating it looked like, and everything we heard and everything we saw really felt like that would be the smoothest route for us to make that transition, because we knew it was going to be a major uphill climb. So really wanted to kind of check all the boxes, as many as we could, to make that transition smoother. And it had a lot to do with your Excel emulator, basically being able to make things look like and feel like something that folks are already used to. That was a huge piece to making this decision. And then you get into more of those intangible things. The partnership with Beck on this was a big one. We really felt like, when talking to these to all of the companies that we were talking to, a lot of them you're just buying a tool from. You're buying a tool, you're plugging it in, and you're using it. But with we really wanted something more than that, because we are unique. I'm not saying we're the only ones that do the things we do and the way we do it, but there's so many different facets to how we do estimating and how we do pre-construction at Ryan Companies, that we really wanted something that we wanted to have a partner in this. We wanted to make sure we were able to talk with you and talk with others and figure out the best way to do things, not just the way to do things or a way to do things, but what's the best way to do things? What's the best route we could go? And really felt like with Beck that was you guys coming to us with that, really, and that definitely set Beck apart. Was the not only the willingness to be a partner, but the desire to be a partner in this process. So that was a big thing. And kind of related to that is really your roadmap for the future as well, and knowing that and seeing that there's goals and there's things that Beck wants to do with Destiny and beyond Destiny even, and where it's going to go and where you guys going to take it, and that we're a part of that, and we're a part of helping get that to where it needs to be for everybody. So those were probably the biggest things that really set Beck apart and set Destiny from the others, that made us, it kind of made it an easy decision once it came down to it.
Thank you, Jim. That's very kind words. I'm sorry, Scott, very kind words.
It's okay.
Right in the center of my screen is names right. Okay, so this one's for both of you. Jim and Scott, lessons learned with about 5 minutes or so less, pros and cons. What worked, what didn't work, and what would you do differently?
I'll start off on it. So looking at, you could call it a con or a lesson learned, or maybe what we would do differently. If we look back on the process, we probably would have a smaller core team just during that implementation. And I think the reason for that is it probably would have streamlined some of the initial meetings where we could, take a smaller team and go get that input and get that feedback when needed from the rest of our, team, our regions, our department. But I think it would have made us a little bit more nimble. I think what was, maybe a couple things that we didn't really understand or realize, maybe switching between, just using Excel and a bunch of different Excel tools was, when we have a database now, we were creating one database, but we knew all along we were going to create multiple, databases for each of our regions. And what it does take in terms of a maintenance standpoint, we started with one Now we have 10. So if we want to make a change to a database, it's a change times 10. Same thing with our templates. You know, we're probably getting close to our sweet spot. We started with 4 or 5 or 6 working with Beck. Right now we're about 9 or 10. And once again, if you make a change, if the company makes a change in anything, right, like you're just maintaining all of those templates and just understanding what it does actually take to maintain and to make those changes. In terms of, I guess the final piece would be something I didn't really think about or expect at all, but now we're relying on our IT department because we're hosting all of our own information. It's server access. So, you know, now there's more parties involved in maybe fixing something where it could just be, you know, a couple people involved. So that at times can make things take a little bit longer. You know, it's just a more realization of a new process now. But lots of things have gone well, and lots of things that I would encourage people if they're looking at a process like this is you always want to start with involving volunteers, and don't be afraid to ask people to volunteer, because there's always people in your group that are wanting to try new software and new processes and are excited by that. In-person training, I think, is a must for people to provide that kind of you know, customer service that they need and that experience, so they're just not, because you have an interface you've never seen before. I think it worked really well. I mentioned it before, but we always took feedback and we always tried to implement it as quickly as possible. And I think that helped us get more buy-in from the staff along the way. And as we started our very first training to, you know, kind of wrapping up the bulk of our trainings this year in March, we learned where to stop the education process because people max out as well. I think we went from, you know, initially 7 hours of training, and we've dialed it back to right around 4. So we've almost cut it in half and looking to maybe even streamline it more if possible. So just, you know, more information doesn't necessarily mean people are actually absorbing it or recognizing it or will remember anything that they, you know, because obviously that using the software is where the real learning happens. So we've continued to eliminate ways, I mentioned already, to make mistakes in our own process and continuing to improve that. So I think that's something that people have to be willing to embrace, because it also, sometimes you have to change course and change direction, or, you know, some temporary pain that you have to go update a bunch of things in 10 databases. You know, that 2 hours of time or 5 hours of time might save hundreds of hours of time for your team in actual implementing those changes. And then finally, like, we've just really tried to have excellent customer service internally and support. You know, we tell everyone at every training, call us anytime, and we mean that. That we'd rather get the call that I can't figure out what's going on than, oh, I forgot to distribute a fee and my estimate isn't showing the right number, and I present, you know, it's a much different conversation. So now that we're providing, we want to continue to provide that customer service, but in 2023 and beyond, continue to migrate into having more experts around the country so they can help troubleshoot with smaller teams and continue to be more nimble. So yeah, I think that was kind of our lessons learned and our pros and cons along the way so far.
Fantastic, thank you. We only have put about 7 minutes left. So Alex, are there any questions? I'm looking for questions.
There are a couple of questions. First of all, I just wanted to thank Jim and Scott today. We'll get into some of these questions, but it's been a wonderful discussion so far. Our first question is, what is meant by a small internal implementation team? Does that mean the number of people on the internal team?
Yeah, so we, when, you know, if you're going from not using a database prior like we were, because I'll compare it to my friend that, you know, works for another company, and they went from database to database. So their implementation and their training was much more different than ours. But just the number of people that you have at your company that are involved in that initial process, I would say, I think you would recommend, Doug, maybe 5, 6 people on that from the company, and then Beck will usually provide 2 that you're interacting with on a weekly, bi-weekly basis. We had, I think, 14.
Mm-hmm.
Because we didn't know any better, and we didn't believe Doug when he told us to only have 6. So
Yeah.
It wasn't a bad thing. It was just like a realization. Yeah, it probably would have been a little bit smoother to have fewer voices along the way. But that's all that I meant.
And it's even more important to have that team as a dedicated team, a team that, like Doug mentioned, is not just a part-time. This is what you do at the end of the day or something like that, which is what we started with. And I'll definitely take my lumps on that one, on how I started that. But having that small team that is basically fully dedicated to this implementation is hugely important.
Awesome. Next question is, how has Destiny improved your estimating efficiencies?
I think what we're I guess I'll assume what the if the efficiency means time to create an estimate, or maybe efficiency means something else. But I think in terms of some of the efficiencies we're seeing is, if there was something that we couldn't figure out in Excel, like we've had Mary, or our guru, like, there's some stuff that only Mary can figure out. So I think in terms of efficiencies, we have more internal resources to help people that are trying to make an estimate, or trying to do something, or trying to go through a process. So I think we've seen efficiency there. I think where we want to continue to see efficiency is how we build our estimates. So we have some customized templates that the line items are pre-populated in there, which I think drives a lot of efficiency for our industrial group, our senior living, our multifamily group, because they're using the same 250 line items on, that's building usually 80 to 90% of their estimates every single time. And then the nuances from job to job, they can pepper in. So we want to, on kind of the all other projects, right? Like just the opportunistic jobs that we have, we want to continue to build efficiencies in using assemblies, ask a few questions, and then it populates the line items that you need. And that was something that, you always had the entire list of line items in Excel, which is great. Now we want to kind of streamline it to, it's like, this is actually what you need in your estimate, because this is actual scope that's in your project. Efficiency wise, Scott, what else would you say? I would, we can see like you mentioned it, we can see the information sooner. So there's efficiency there, but what else are you thinking?
I think a big area, a couple things. One, I think that the efficiency of time of being able to do the estimating will get better, just as people use it more and more. We're still fairly new in actually using it, but that's gonna, I think we'll start to see that. I think the biggest thing we can see right now, outside of what you've already talked about, is really that accessibility to and transparency into information. I can go in and find every project we've done for this particular client, no matter where it's been done in the country. I don't have to start calling around or send an email out to the whole group, say who's done work for project or for client X, and where was it and when was it and who's got experience in this. I can just go in and start finding those things and be able to get right to it. And I think that's where one of the biggest efficiency areas is going to be, is just saving that time in that initial research. And again, we're not quite there fully yet, but we're starting to see it. And that's what I think is important. That's only going to grow.
Amazing. We'll take one more question. We do have a couple of remaining questions, and please note that we will send those on to today's presenters so that they might be able to answer those. But the last question we'll take today is, does Ryan Companies have personnel assigned to just updating the 10 databases?
It is a part of our core group's team. So there's 3 of us that it's not by any means a full-time job for us, but the other 62 people in our department don't have to worry about that as part of their process.
And it's something I think we continue to look at and continue to figure out what is the right way to do it as we continue to grow, and whether we build more databases or refine the ones we have, or whatever it is, we will still continue to evaluate what that looks like.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank Doug. I want to thank Jim. I want to thank Scott today for your participation in this discussion. Thank you, everyone, for attending. As noted, if your question didn't get answered today, we will ensure that it does by one of today's presenters. And also, this recording will be available following today's discussion. So look out for that email and on our YouTube and socials as well. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.